Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being on here. I did screw up the time. I had put 5 a.m. and it was Erin B's that corrected me. She's like, oh, I'm going to share this out. And then she says, you need to change it to 5 p.m. So I saw a lot of comments here that are like, oh, what's up? What's going on? So that's why it's my flub up. Thank you so much. And Alexandra, hello, bonjour. And so everyone, this is Bridget Read. Bridget, thank you so much for being on here.
Hey, I had no idea you had said 5 a.m. anywhere, so I completely missed that drama.
So this, if you don't know who Bridget Read is, you're going to hear a lot about this incredible person. She's written a book, and she had sent me this book. I have the digital copy. I read it. And there were so many times when I was reading it, I'd put my phone down and I was like experiencing a lot of emotions because I'm like, she gets it. She understands. There wasn't this distance of like this, oh, what is this strange thing called multi-level marketing? And there wasn't like the ridicule that so often happens when people are tackling this topic. So who is Bridget Read? She's written this book. Bridget Read is a features writer at New York Magazine, reporting on housing inequality and the real estate industry for Curbed. Previously, she wrote for The Cut and was a culture writer at Vogue. She lives in Brooklyn, New York. Thank you for being here.
Okay, I'm delighted.
So this is
my
also
first live stream, as I told you earlier. So
I love it. I feel so honored. So the description, there was this part in the book where you had, and it leapt out at me, where you described learning more about multi-level marketing as feeling vertigo. And I think so many of us, when we're waking up from being in multi-level marketing, we know that feeling so well. And so why did you write this book?
Such a good question. And honestly, the story of multi-level marketing is too long for anything but a book. And I realized that very quickly when I wrote a really short article for New York Magazine, where I work, in 2021 during, we were still peak pandemic, and I did a quick turnaround story about MLMs kind of pouncing on women who were, made up the majority of people who left their jobs in the US at least. And I just right away, there were things I couldn't understand about it, things I couldn't answer, and sort of had to quickly kind of breeze by. Like I remember writing the definition of multi-level marketing, and now that I know so much more about it, like it's almost comical how you describe it. Everyone gets a cut. It's so, it's so not what it really is, obviously. And then I just sort of all those questions really lingered with me for a while, and I became kind of obsessed just privately. Started following different sort of uplines from different companies and looking at the way they were doing business. And I report now on housing and the real estate industry. But before, I was working at The Cut, which is the New York Magazine's women's vertical, but did some stories about business, and I just had never seen anything like it. So I became obsessed, like I said, and really, once I started digging in, it has to be a book. The story is too long and goes too far back. I was writing a friend today, and he read the book, and he said it felt like I was reading the story of the United States, the story of America, which of course, the United States is we've brought the way we do things across the world. So it's now the story of the world, unfortunately, but that's the story of multi-level marketing. It's so deeply tied up with the last century of the history of capitalism, of the economy, and not to sound crazy right away, but that's truly what it is. And so it had to be a book. It's too long to be anything else. Even a documentary, I think you really have to deeply engage in the way you can do with a book. So that's what it became.
It's so interesting. Like when I was reading your book, it's so complicated and complex. Like you said, it's like this whole history, and it can really overwhelm people who are coming out of a commercial cult. Many of us we've experienced like a lot of indoctrination, and it's very difficult to just make sense of things. It's very difficult to just sit down and read something and then, never mind, starting to realize how deep this thing goes. A lot of us experience this, like this trajectory of thinking, well, maybe it's just my company. They just don't know. If I tell them what's going on here, they're going to fix it. And then it becomes, well, maybe not all companies are bad. There seems to be this path of like getting out. And when you start learning about this, it can be really overwhelming. And what I love about your book is that it makes it like in this morsel size, deep understanding, this complicated history in this really cool way of telling a story that helps, I believe, like victims and survivors and their families understand what's going on. And I know that there's like, you're speaking to like a broader market of people that are like, oh, this is interesting. Maybe they haven't been in multi-level marketing, but for people who have been in it, I can't recommend this book enough. It's just so well done. There was another part in there. So the first part that stuck out at me was the vertigo. And the second part was, you mentioned, so in the book, I don't want to give like too much away,
you can give it away. It's this long, so that you can't possibly give it away. Unfortunately, I've written a very long book, but go ahead.
You juxtapose like the story of multi-level marketing, like the historical beginnings and how it all shapes out, and then it's juxtaposed with a woman that's been in Mary Kay and like kind of her journey through this, how much money she's spending, and then. And there was a part in there where you just mentioned about the retail sales. Now, this might be like a tiny little inconsequential point to people reading this book, but I'm telling you, for people that have been in multi-level marketing, this is going to blow their hair back, because it blew my hair back. You just mentioned it was the distributors are buying this, buying it at a discount, same as all of us do. A lot of us are like, well, you can just sign up for the discount. But then Mary Kay is saying that they're calculating that, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're calculating that purchase as retail sales, but it's like they're doubling it. It's like adding another however much money onto it. And they're saying, well, this is retail sales. I had no idea they did that. Can you talk more about that and explain that to people? Because there's people that have not heard this ever. There's people that are just waking up from multi-level marketing. They're coming across this and they're like, wait, what?
Sure. And, it is different from company to company. So I would actually love, and we've talked a little bit about this before, and but talking about in your company, how, personal volume was calculated, right? That everybody does it a little different. In Mary Kay, it's just very obvious what's going on. And if you explain it to anybody who works in a regular retail business, it sounds crazy because it's just speculation, right? So, in Mary Kay, the sort of amount that gets all your bonuses, gets your commissions, is called your production amount, which sounds quite the opposite of what it actually is, which is why, MLM has this weird doublespeak where nothing is what it seems. But a purchase, what a consultant buys at their wholesale rate, and they get a 50% discount approximately. There's things like taxes that actually make the discount less than 50%, and then they have to pay for shipping. So there's actually ways that it eats into that 50%. But anyway, you buy a product or you buy much more often a pack of products, right? An inventory order. So this woman was told all the star consultants buy $1,800 worth of products right away. So that was after she bought her starter kit. That's her first purchase. And in Mary Kay, that amount immediately gets doubled because it's a 50% discount. And Mary Kay assumes that she sells it at the discount and sells all of it. So it's called $3,600 right away in their internal Mary Kay metrics. And she, I went into her back office because at this point she had access to her Mary Kay account. So I could see where this is all being tracked. And so Mary Kay records that as her $3,600 in production. And of course, at the end of a Mary Kay fiscal year, which ends in June, prizes are given away to people who have the most production, and they're called saleswomen, and they're queen of sales. And, you can do 20,000, 40,000, and much farther up for the people who have the biggest downlines. And it's called sales. So that right away is just shocking that that's allowed. And that's at the core of the whole industry. And I included also how the entire industry uses a similar formula. They I think use 75%. I have to check what I have in here. But I got that from a Direct Selling Association document that is an advisory for how companies can report their retail sales. So that calculation, which is just taking what participants buy, and we're just gonna estimate the sales, the retail sales, and then the DSA marches on down to DC and calls itself a $40 billion industry based on fictional sales. And of course, there's so much evidence in the wild of this, right? Like the fact that you've never heard of these products if you've never been inside, the fact that people have loads and loads of inventory sitting around. I ended up sneaking into a Mary Kay convention, and my taxi driver in Dallas happened to be this middle-aged Black woman who had been in Mary Kay twice in the 90s, and she said she still had lipsticks. So Mary Kay called those sales in the 90s, and they're still sitting in her garage. So sorry if that went on too long, but that, and then I would love to actually hear about in a more maybe a newer MLM like Monat, where a lot of people are buying. Mary Kay still has a bit of a culture of buying in person. Mary Kay ladies actually do kind of go door to door and they have some customers in person, and they sell to each other in person. But I would love to know what the kind of personal volume calculus, how that was done in Monat, and how it might be similar.
I just realized, I remember now having a conversation with you because I was like,
you forgot. I know it was years ago. A book takes years. Don't do it, people. Don't do it. But yeah.
I just had the flashback. So yeah, I think I had no idea about, I'm glad that you brought that up about the calculation that the DSA uses, saying just take this percentage of the purchases and you can use that as retail sales. This is information that people need to know. The same thing I'm sure is going on in Canada. They'll say it's like how many millions of dollars worth of sales. So I should dig into that and see what the corresponding figure is in Canada. It's probably the same thing. So this was the other thing about Amway. So a lot of people, when you're in multi-level marketing, will say this isn't your grandmother's MLM. And we have no idea that how MLM, like where it started from. And a lot of people, when they get out, it's like, they'll hear about Amway, but they don't know like what came before Amway. And now I had heard about Carl Renberg and Nutrilite from, Robert Fitzpatrick. And then I saw when you'd referenced him in the book, I was just like, yeah, it's like she's getting all this stuff. It's so good.
He's like the guy with the kind of lantern, like guiding the path in the beginning. And, there really was a moment where I had to decide like, okay, I'm going to go with you. So he's very much a big character in the book.
When you start to talk about Neutra Bio, so I think a lot of people do know or are familiar with, they know about Nutrilite and then Amway, and then it's kind of, it's like all these different iterations. But you talked about Neutra Bio, this other company, and then this mention of this so these are two questions kind of in one. Like this whole entity of Neutra Bio, and then there's these other spin-offs before Amway kind of takes over. And then you got this bee in your bonnet about Mary Kay. And the reason why I'm saying that is because those bumblebee pins on the Mary Kay jacket. But it's like, how is this tie-in? Like, was there a connection between Mary Kay and Amway, or is it just like this spontaneous, iteration of another multi-level marketing company, and then you actually found it? So can you tell us more about this Neutra Bio, how that kind of started? And then
I'm actually I have this notebook that I want to grab up here. Hold on. Let's see.
And as you're watching this, if you have a question, you can put it in and we could address it. Might not get to all of them. I'd
love to chat with anybody. Okay, so this is and Dave, who's in the chat right now, Dave Vaughn, who rocks and is so smart.
Dave is amazing.
Dave has worked on a version of the same thing that I was working on when I did this book, which is a map. of MLM, and he's made one, and like this was
Oh
mine
my-
when I was working on it. And this only goes through like this 80s, so it's not even like close to being done. And there's so many we don't know about. Um, so and Dave sent me his when I was writing my book, and was so helpful. And anyway, hi Dave. So yeah, I mean, as a journalist, figuring out where these companies came from and like what multi-level marketing is was really important, because it's just like in any other kind of business industry, we have um this we have a history here, whether it's like the auto industry in the United States or mills or anything. And we have that history, even if it's unsavory, right? And a lot of it is meaning like it involved slavery, or it involved crackdowns on workers' rights or really awful conditions. Like we know about where these things came from and how they evolved, or like the beginning of the internet. Anyway, all of which is to say, like, it's not normal to have you Google MLM and you get the Sky Carl Renborg and there's a Stanford website and you're like, okay. But no one else really has ever dug into more than that, and no one has cared to. Um, and part of that is because I have learned doing this that white collar crime is really underreported and really under investigated in term versus other types of crime, other non-white collar, right? So there's just like a lack of understanding of like what is a Ponzi scheme versus like a chain letter versus all this other stuff. Anyway, so it was really important to me to try to see if MLMs were all doing the same thing early on. That felt like a really important thing to answer, because it's like, okay, Neutralite, Amway comes from Neutralite, and then these other companies sort of are in the same thread. But some of them early on, I couldn't tell where they came from, and Mary Kay was the biggest one. And Mary Kay is really important. It's a very front facing company. JP Morgan has worked with Mary Kay, as doing some of their kind of like global marketing stuff. Mary Kay has teamed up with New York Fashion Week. Like it's a very public company. Mary Kay is very well known. There was a made-for-TV movie starring Parker Posey and Shirley MacLaine about Mary Kay from the early 2000s that I'm going to try to screen in New York actually soon. But anyway, so like really important, right? If the story that direct selling tells about itself is that it naturally evolved from like the Yankee Peddler, that this was something that multiple people invented at the same time, that would be a little more evidence that it's not a fraud, right? That everyone's copying. It's not the same thing. So, anyway, I'm being really long-winded about that, but I
Please,
sort
that's
of
why
went
we're here.
insane about
Please.
that.
Yes, it's good.
I was like, I must figure this out. I must. And there was evidence that like Mary Kay was sort of around the same people. Like Mary Kay was really into Napoleon Hill, who's like wrote this book, Think and Grow Rich, which plays a huge part in my book. And like, I think Jane Marie has covered him in her book on MLM. And I know she has on the podcast, like, and he's very, very close to MLM. The early, and he's like a total criminal fraudster, like violent, abusive husband, like all this horrible stuff. But he wrote Think and Grow Rich, and all of the Neutra Bio guys, Abundavita, these are the very early companies, which then lead into Holiday Magic and Costcott and Dare to Be Great, which are very important because they are actually, taken to court by the FTC and the SEC, and they are shut down in the 70s. They all basically copied Napoleon Hill. Anyway, Mary Kay loves Napoleon Hill, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, she was in Texas. She was in normal direct selling, like pre-MLM direct selling, like which was like Stanley, the Party Method, Tupperware before that they became MLM. They were just normal door-to-door selling, which was shitty and awful, but was not a pyramid scheme. And then but I could not figure out where did Mary Kay learn the plan, which is the guys who invented MLM, Mittinger and Castleberry, they called it the plan. And then finally, I was able to look into Mary Kay's husband who died at the breakfast table. And like all of MLM I've learned doing this is like pulling apart propaganda stories. And the Mary Kay propaganda story is that her husband was in sales and he was going to help her open her own company once she left her other sales company, and he died at the breakfast table. But they never said what the sales were. And so finally, in doing archival digging for his name and various spellings and where he was and everything, I was able to learn that he was in Neutra Bio, which is a direct offshoot of Nutrilite, and basically spun off right before Amway, and was founded by a guy from Chicago who there is some people have said that I spoke to claim that he trained Rich and Jay. There's not evidence of this left anymore because, again, no one has cared about this for way too long. But he's the people that were in Neutra Bio were hugely important. Jim Rohn, who was an evangelical preacher, who we know, of course, becomes the international philosopher of Herbalife, and is today shared on TikTok and Instagram as this like self-improvement guru. He was part of Neutra Bio. Neutra Bio was basically the first American and Canadian pyramid scheme, like where they covered the country. They were shut down actually by the FDA first, but the FTC was, in different states were shutting them down too. Neutra Bio, Jim Rohn was banned from operating a chain selling scheme in the state of California, and then becomes Herbalife. And of course, who does Jim Rohn train? Tony Robbins. So like, that's when you start to put your little tinfoil hat on and go, what the fuck? This is the whole world that we live in, and we did not know where it came from. So anyway, that was why connecting Mary Kay to the early kind of cabal of these companies was really important. Yeah.
So many of us, when we leave multi-level marketing, we're trying to figure out, okay, what's reality? Is there such thing as a good multi-level marketing? Then there's multi-level marketing company. Then there's the next discovery, because there's been a lack of information out there easily accessible and just openly discussed about the history that you're describing. Jim Rohn, Napoleon Hill. This was a shock to me. I thought I'd had it figured out. I was already, speaking out. I was one of the many people that think, if I speak out loud enough, I'm going to make a big difference right away. And I felt this urgency. I needed to warn everybody. And this also like this moral obligation. And it was such a shock when I started to learn, this was months after, about Napoleon Hill and Jim Rohn. And then there's that other guy. Is his name Vincent Beale? Is that?
Norman Vincent Peale. Yeah, he's, yes, very related. And of course is Donald Trump's childhood preacher, who taught him to never think negative thoughts, to always think positively. Trump, who then, of course, was the face of 2 MLMs, appoints Betsy DeVos. Yep. A conspiracy is forming.
Yes, and it's important for people to have this information, because it's just like, even being like my one of my coaches when I was in this group Rank Makers, she had also done an additional certification. Her name's Jen Ryla. Shout out to Jen, because she got out and she's amazing. She's spoken out a lot too. But she got additional certification through Tony Robbins. And like, there's just no historical background about where these people came from, who they interacted with. And it would be very helpful to know, instead of us kind of just figuring out on our own through this like underground network, but it's kind of on social media. That's the only way we're able to connect with each other, like victims helping victims, survivors helping survivors. So that's why I'm like, this was just so fascinating, the way that interesting, the way that you connect the dots and spell it out in a way that's not overwhelming to victims. And I hope people watching this right now just had your minds blown about that part too, because it's a gooder. Okay, the next... Okay, so I put, it's clear that you sought to understand the history of multi-level marketing, how they came to be, and to really understand what the participants endure. It's detectable. For me, I'm like really hypersensitive. It's something that it just really irritates me when that empathy isn't there. And you can really feel it with the work that you've done. You can tell that you've sought to understand and not like to really understand and then to explain it to other people. You talked earlier about infiltrating that Mary Kay convention. And I just thought that was the coolest thing, like how you went like sleuthing through there, timing it when there's like people all walking in at this, but to make the point to go in there and to be like a participant and not like, you know, arms folded thinking, oh, I would never get sucked into this. You really sought to experience it and take in what other people were feeling. So, and you described you had an emotional reaction too. So now, after like all of this time has elapsed, you've written the book. It's going to be like released is it May 6th? It's going to be released?
May 6th, yeah, a week from today.
But people can order it now, and it's in the description below the link to your website. But looking back now, so it's going to be like the book is going to be available, you know, May 6th. What is something that you realized about MLM after attending that convention, after spending that time, that you had no idea about before?
I wouldn't say I had no idea about how MLMs weaponize trauma and suffering, because, you know, that's very obvious how they do it. And of you and Aaron and all kinds of activists in this space now have really helped shed light on that and shared lives and chats and all kinds of things that show that. But just the incredible parade, honestly, of trauma that the women at the convention had been through and were encouraged to sublimate into this obsession with sales and earning money, which of course is fictional. But like this idea that, you know, just story after story of, well, she was broke, or she was sick, or her child was sick, or her child died, or her, you know, it was like, you know, every sort of hurt was cataloged and then really, like, I use the word sublimated because that's how it felt to see it translated into, but she's here and she came to the convention and she sold XYZ and she, you know, made it, and that made it all worth it. And it was really moving. Like, I was moved to watch this fall and rise, and it was like incredibly manipulative and powerful, and so that was really heartbreaking. And just it was really important to feel that. And, you know, everybody in, you know, has been through things, gone through things, but obviously, like, the things that they were talking about really index to Americans that don't have a lot of resources. You know, they were paying for healthcare, paying for elder care, you know, people who were, you know, their family members had been laid off. Like, it was very much, you know, MLMs prey on the vulnerable. And the way that it made everyone in the room, all of the women in the room, although there were some men, really turn their pain into this very individualistic desire to, like, produce and hit this production count, which of course is their own exploitation, right? Production is literally what they pay. So it's so incredibly, like, it's beyond on the nose, right? When you're explaining it. But what was so then really hard for me to watch is, like, what if all these women looked at each other and were like, wow, what do we notice about what we're all going through together? And what if there was some collective sublimation together and some, you know, common traumas and common suffering, and instead of just all trying to get individually rich, like, you know, and this is like so pie in the sky, but like the amount of women who could have, like, I don't know, joined some kind of like citizens group to, I don't know, fight for some kind of like healthcare coverage, or like a lot of them were about childcare, right? They don't have childcare. So a lot of the story is like, I'm home and I needed a side hustle for childcare. If all of the women in Mary Kay, like, went to their freaking council members, you know, congressperson's office and advocated for for free childcare, like, well, maybe that would help, and so of course that it sounds so silly, but like MLMs really are the opposite of solidarity, the way that they turn systemic and structural problems, like you not having access to adequate healthcare, is a structural problem, and they turn it into an individual problem that one can transcend by just working harder. And so seeing that, and again, I'm going on really long, but
no, that's why you're here. That's what we want.
But just rambling. Okay.
It's not at all.
Stop.
Please. Yeah. No, please
but
keep going.
seeing that in person was really fucked up and just very illustrative.
So please don't feel that you're going on and on. That's why we're here, is to hear it from in your words, in your voice, because so many of us, when we're in multi-level marketing and we leave, we're trying to find the language to describe our experience. And we just fall back on the terminology that we use when we're in multi-level marketing. And then maybe we start grasping at buzzwords, and it's like trying to put it together. I just wanted to comment too, how it's commonly known that multi-level marketing companies are predatory and they prey on vulnerable people. You hear this, but the way, like how you describe the parade of the stories, like the ups and the downs, and you're feeling it, that is important for people to know, because it's just so much more than, why don't these people just get up and leave? It's just a tube of lipstick. Like, it's starting to get that information out there to the public, what this entails. And to your point about mentioning how much work people, or how much good could be accomplished from all these, predominantly women that are in this group. Fortunately, that is happening on the outside with the anti-MLM movement. There's like other, avenues that people are going into, but there's that carryover. And this is just in the early stages of that. So, it's kind of funny. If you could just pick up all this good work, you say, if all these women could just, and men as well, but if these people could just apply this to their own business, man, they'd be like, shooting off. But the problem is it's in this like really toxic, coercive control environment. And it's fortunately we can like use this stuff after some of us, when we leave, and then we can, speak out. But there's also people that aren't speaking out, making content, but they're doing just as much work in the background, like connecting with people who have left. People sending content to others. There's so much going on, like people like Dave Vaughn that are creating the whole map. So Dave is amazing.
Dave rocks. And I think he asked a question, but
okay. I'll scroll back up here.
But do you want should we save them to the end?
No, we can do that right now. This is flexible here. Okay, I'm going to just see here. I've probably scrolled by it. I'll just go here. Hall says, my MK upline pressured me into credit card debt in my early 20s, had no financial literacy, didn't understand interest, 30% interest rate on that card, all for some shitty makeup with no shade range.
Oh yeah, and you can sign up for that card right away at the convention. They will, you can sign up for it, and then spend it right away at the convention. They'll sign you right up. No credit check, no nothing.
Arrow Deal says, this reminds me of the time my friend convinced me to go to a party in 2017. I got all cute and everything. It turns out to be an hour Mary Kay pitch, car spiel included.
Not surprised.
Dave says, the MLM conference will talk about how MLMs have weaponized global action on the SDGs to reach into new countries and regions. What does SDG mean?
Yeah, Dave, will you tell us?
Okay, we'll get, because there's maybe
I don't know that one either.
Okay. Here we go. Here's another. We're just going to get on to Dave here. Dave, I'm going to do it better at my own company. Started at the very first MLM. Here we go. Another Mary Kay participants. Peach shoes. I was in MK. Ugh. Awful makeup. They tell you to women and compliment their skin as a segue to sell them. They're vultures. I have horror stories from them. You can see MK's Pink Mansion in Dallas.
I didn't go to the mansion, but I did go to the corporate headquarters, which has a weird, creepy museum.
Can you talk a little bit about that museum for people who...
It's so, I don't know if people know the concept of a Potemkin village, but it basically just means like a fake propaganda presentation. that is meant to cover up what's really going on and look normal and happy and shiny and whatever. And Mary Kay has a museum to her tucked into a corner of this corporate office building in Dallas. And it is like bizarre. It is, like she is, it's literally like the queen or something. There's glass cases with all the old Mary Kay products. There's giant portraits of her. There's dresses that she wore at convention. It's remarkable. And of course, like, again, I really hope someone else writes another book because there's just so much here. But even with Mary Kay, like, there's an early book, a book written by one of her earliest recruits, this woman, Jackie Brown, called Ask Me About Mary Kay, and it's maybe 15 years old. And, she defected from Mary Kay in the 60s because she understood it was fraud. Unfortunately, she started her own MLM after that. But anyway, so there was early on, there was a lot of fractious history that is all, also kept out of the beautiful museum, right? So the museum makes it literally seem like you're like, I don't know, in the National Archives or something, and you're looking at like, Sally Ride or like a famous, a feminist. Like it's so weird. Anyway, so that's the museum. And they were like really obviously, like, the other thing about a Potemkin village is like it doesn't matter to anyone until like someone important comes who's an outsider, and you like everyone get in positions. And so no one comes to see the Mary Kay Museum. And so when I walked up to the security guard and was like, "Hi," she was literally like, "Who are you? Like, why are you here?" No one is ever asking, which is like when we fact check this book, which, like, again, this book was fact checked with like a very, very professional fact checker. She and I reached out to every single company that's in the book, including Mary Kay. They never got back to us to respond to all of the claims that are in the book. And some of the companies, like some of the Amway downlines, like we couldn't even figure out the contacts on their websites. And these are like multi-million-dollar companies, but they're not real. So they don't have actual comms people. So that was a whole other like rabbit hole that was so funny and almost honestly kind of fun because they don't have they're not corporations. Like they're not real companies. It's like the mafia having a website and a landing page and an LLC, it's like, well, our HR department will get back to you kind of thing.
And just, it's funny because as I was reading the book, I was like on this journey with you, like of like the delight of exploring these rabbit holes and like figuring things out. But it doesn't make it overly complicated. Like it is such a complicated mess, but you make it understandable for people. I found Dave's comment or question. In digging into the history, Bridget, where did you see the alignment with kitchen table conspiracies that have dominated the political landscape? The Pipeline, the Atlantic, covered back in 2021.
I think, let me just quickly see if I can pull this up. I think I know what you're talking about, Dave. In terms of like QAnon type stuff. Conspiracy theories. Dave, sorry to we keep making you comment more, but will you tell us you're operating on a higher plane? But what you said about sustainable development goals is really interesting, and I'll just flag that there is oh yeah, that's what I was just reading, that there is a chapter in the book that Dave is kind of referencing that goes into how MLM went global and how MLM really tracks on like US expansion and US imperialism, frankly. And that I actually feel like if there's one part of the book that I wish I could have dug in deeper is MLM internationally, because MLMs have been predominantly overseas since the late 80s. Like most people suffering in MLMs are not Americans and not Canadians and not North Americans. They are international. So that's a heartbreaking and horrible thing, because if they can't get attention in the US, imagine how it is internationally. So yeah, Dave's drop that Atlantic article you're talking about.
Who asked this question here? Somebody was, where did I see it? Somebody was asking if Arbonne was in your book.
No, Arbonne is not in the book, but honestly, there's too many companies in the book. And like, I would have loved to do Arbonne. I mean, there was essential oils and, I mean, there's so much. Roden and Fields is such a big one. I mean, there's so many. So the answer is no. And I wish that I had, as volume 2. And Utah, same thing. I'm seeing this question about, are there Utah ties? Yeah. I would have gone longer on Utah also if I could. And Ponziomics, Bob's book, has a more robust state by state story about how individual state legislatures have really gone easy on MLM, and he has some more information on Utah.
As you can see, and even if you're just watching this, maybe you're just like hopping on to this live stream, hop on a Zoom call, hop on this live stream. But you know how important it is like just to hear the name of our company or a location that we are. It's just to get that validation. It doesn't matter like how many pieces of content are made about multi-level marketing, because there's been such a lack. Just hearing that somebody has, made content about the company that you were involved with is so incredibly helpful to people that have been in this, just to try to, I don't know, it's more than just that word validating. Like it's something deeper. I don't know how to explain it, but I'm seeing it reflected in the chat here. I did notice that you noticed in the acknowledgements that you credited a number of anti-MLM content creators, of which Erin Bees is one. And I spoke with Erin earlier, and she said to say hello to you.
Oh, so, I love her.
And I just want to say thank you so much for that, because a lot of this work, long before I ever began making content, there's been so many anti-MLM content creators that have done so much heavy lifting. And it's just really, it really means a lot to have that acknowledgement of the work that goes on, that so many excellent anti-MLM content creators do. Doesn't matter what their subscriber count is. And it's just really cool that you acknowledge that. I wanted to thank you for that. And I do believe your book is going to help a lot of people. What do you want victims of multi-level marketing to know?
What do I want them to know? Well, part of it's tricky because I'm a human being and I bring a lot of views and my own, politics, my own ideology to everything that I do. I don't pretend that I don't. But the job of a journalist is really, really to try to be as objective as possible and to tell the truth. And so, what I didn't do this, I am not this, I don't play the same role you do. I'm not an advocate. I'm not an activist. I don't do what I do to validate the victims of multi-level marketing. And that's really important because that enables me to have some authority as a journalist to outside. And I do think I'm incredibly touched, and I'm so glad that you feel validated. And I'm not surprised, because the truth that I arrived at is your truth, is that this is exploitative and that there really is no meaningful difference between multi-level marketing and pyramid schemes. Like, that is what the evidence shows. This thing that has, the journalists have been saying for decades, like, we can't technically say that. It's like, no, yes, you can, yes, you can. And so maybe honestly, just, yeah, I'm being a very old school kind of journalist where I don't want to answer that question in like a, because it's really not my role. But I do think that this is a world that has gone on for so long in the shadows and made people feel stupid or like they're idiots for joining this kind of world. And no one is an idiot. This is not only like a project that is 80 years in the making. So when people recruit you, the reason they're good at it is because people have been working on this pitch since 1945. So hello, but yeah, I mean, what I want people to know or to take away from the book, or sort of step two is like, what does MLM say about the rest of our economic organization and how we relate to each other, and how might we then take what you learn from MLM and imagine a different world. Like, that to me is really like, if coming out of MLM and then reading this book was like, now here's where I'm revealing my politics, right? But like, was really radicalizing in terms of like enabling people to think of a future that isn't just demarcated by your earning capacity, how much income you can make, and the materialism that MLM like relies on, that imagining the yacht and the car and the Stanley Cup and all this stuff, that to me was like a huge transformative experience of reporting this book. Was, I want, like, Monique, the woman in the book who joins Mary Kay, who at the end, like, when she is able to leave this company and say, I am worth more than the dollar amount you put on my name, that to me is like the core revolutionary feeling that one can arrive at when you see somebody reject that version of human experience as like a cog in a machine, or a dollar sign on someone's balance, or a position in a pyramid. I am so much better than that. I bring so much more value to the world than that. Like, that was what she did when she left the company, and she had nothing to fall back on. And to see someone do that it's incredible. Like, the human spirit is so indomitable and incredible. So, that's a beautiful, wonderful thing that I would love people, maybe people who have left, but not quite gotten there, will really get there at the end of the book by seeing themselves aligned with so many others.
I appreciate you making that distinction because it's even like just the way I phrase that question. It's important because as a journalist, you need to, like, as best as you can, have that objectivity. So I'm glad that you explain that to people, because we're all in different stages of awareness of what MLM is and how to even speak out about it. And it's so difficult to find somebody who can have that objectivity. And we all have like the lens of our experience. And I just want to, like, it's
and MLM is, and your experience is worth that. That's what's also important about me being a journalist, is like, how many other crises, the addiction crisis, fentanyl, or the housing crisis, which I report on all the time, like, other crises deserve and have received journalistic attention, objective attention. And so that's important to me, that you guys know that is why I did this book, is because it's worthy of that. And for so long, it's just escaped. There are lots of good journalistic works out there, but honestly, I couldn't believe there wasn't another book besides Bob's, a book that was, in a mainstream publisher. And so anyway, just to reiterate that it's not even, it's really that MLM survivors and MLM structurally deserved a deep dive, an objective deep dive.
It's not that there's like 2, 3 books, 2, 3, 4 books, and then that's it. Like, it's just doesn't even make any sense. Out of all of the topics in the world, like, take the most controversial topic that you can think of, and there's books on it. But MLM, it's crickets. I mean, that's alarming. So, yeah, and you knocked it out of the park with this book. And I just wanted to say too, because anybody's, you mentioned, it's like, political beliefs or whatever. Anybody watching this live stream has been in multi-level marketing, you're welcome here. It doesn't matter what your political beliefs are. It doesn't matter what your religious beliefs are, if you are Christian or if you're not. Multi-level marketing, it doesn't care. It doesn't care who you are, what you believe in, it will go after you. So as you're unpacking, it's really good that you start critically thinking, and you can disagree with people, and you can then, you can always change your mind or make your own opinions, but the choice is up to you now. So I just want to reiterate that for anybody that's coming across this. You might be in a weird place where you're just getting really agitated as you're starting to figure things out. And you're just like, but I want, is this right or is this wrong? And sometimes it's just all a gray area, but you get to make that decision. So everybody is welcome here. I wanted to say that. I'm going to read some more comments here. Oh, here we go. Susie Q says, I'm freaking out right now how gullible and stupid I was to sacrifice 12K of my savings to Riemann. Money meant for me to get a car, but I was sold on the skincare and the ability to make extra part-time dollars.
You are not gullible or stupid. I mean, Julie can tell you the same thing, but honestly, there's stories in the book from people who were taken in by MLM in the 1970s and, up until now. So, towards the end of the book is a woman who joined Amway in 2019 in Brooklyn, in another neighborhood over from where I am. So like the spectrum of so many people, they know how to get you. They sell you on that side hustle and making the money. I mean, no, you're not stupid. You are just a human being,
Dave, it's my fault. YouTube limits length. Yes, the QAnon pipeline. Just curious if you saw more links to conspiracies in the past. Were MLMs connected to the spread of Vietnam War health conspiracies?
Even earlier than that, Dave, actually, or maybe not earlier, but something I found. I mean, okay, first of all, MLMs, the first MLM, Neutralite, was already connected to a conspiracy in that vitamins at the time, and now bear with me, and my boyfriend makes fun of me because he says I don't believe in vitamins, and that's not true. I believe in vitamins, but the supplement industry as we know it, the idea that everybody should be taking these multivitamins all the time, and what they sold Neutralite under at the time was like, Neutralite can cure cancer, it can cure your worry, it can make you skinny, like everything, which is why the FDA is the organization that first went after Neutralite, not the FTC. But Neutra Bio, same thing. So already like quack conspiracies about like, again, and this is the United States after World War II, there was not a more prosperous country on earth, right? And there weren't safer people on earth and people with better access to food and the food supply. And they were being told that like, actually, you're very sick. You don't know it, but you're really sick, right? And like, this is the way we're going to get you out of that. And Neutra Bio also sold vitamins. So yes, already very associated with, what's a better thing to sell in a vitamin, because you literally are like, well, it's going to help you everywhere, and how we can't say exactly, but if you don't take it, aren't you worried? Very so already conspiratorial. And then Neutra Bio in the 60s actually advertised in a right-wing racist magazine put out by Reverend Billy Hargis, who was a right-wing ideologue who helped with the Little Rock bombing, and he was peddling Neutra Bio through his like literal Klansmen. So yes, that happened. William Penpatrick, who's the Holiday Magic founder, he certainly was a conspiracy theorist. Or early on, even when he was critical of the Republican Party, he would say that Reagan was a plant and all this stuff. And then, of course, he was a Republican also. But anyway, so yeah, there's MLM has always been a part of that. And then one of the biggest examples in the book is in the 90s, Amway distributors accused Procter & Gamble of being a cabal of Satanists, and that the guy in the Procter & Gamble logo, who was a man in the moon, was the devil. And they spread these rumors about P&G throughout the Amway voicemail system in the 90s, which was called AmVox. And of course, P&G sued them, and back and forth. And through that litigation is how we get this report by a Notre Dame law professor who helped write the RICO Act, that he sees MLM as the mafia. He literally looks at the structure of Amway and the structure of the mafia and says, Amway operates like organized crime. So that's how we get that. But anyway, so those are sure. But yes, those are just a few examples. Dexter Yeager in the 90s said Bill Clinton was a paganist, Satanist or something. So yes, the roots of MLM and QAnon run really deep.
Being mindful of the time now, I think it's
I'm
good.
okay for a bit. It's
Are you okay?
We're okay for a bit. Yeah.
Okay, good. There's a couple of
Especially if
other.
people have more questions.
There's lots of questions, and I just want to thank the chat for all of the engagement.
Yeah,
and
this is so fun.
Multi-purpose Mama asks, I'm curious, why do you think there haven't been many books written on this topic? Do you think it has to do with legal threats?
No, unfortunately, like what I've learned from doing this is MLM companies have tended to go after creators, go after former distributors who speak out, but not journalists. So that's not really why. I honestly think it's because of what I sort of said at the very top, which is like the story is too big. Because if you want to write about like Herbalife, for example, because Herbalife is the most recent like big story that did get a lot of press at the time. But even in like a 7,000 word profile of Herbalife, right? Like Herbalife started in the 80s. And I'm just thinking about like when I write a feature story, like a long, big magazine story about a subject, you just don't have time to look, okay, so Herbalife started in 1980, but what are they doing? Where did they get MLM? And I didn't have time to go back and trace how Herbalife was started by Mark Hughes, who was trained by Larry Huff, who was trained by Holiday Magic and Neutra Bio, to tell the story of like, oh, these criminals taught this other guy, and so that's it really took a lot of time. And I couldn't have done it if Bob didn't do it first and really like put some major plots on that map out so that I didn't have to start from scratch. So it, my book definitely builds on Bob's book. But in terms of like a main, Bob is not a journalist full time. Bob was able to write that book because that's what he was dedicating his time to. A journalist, are all over the place and have all kinds of assignments. And so that also makes it really hard.
Right. This is a really good insight because I'm really judgmental of a lot of like the way articles have been written. And yes, I can understand and appreciate that it's just too much. It's like trying to tell the story, but there's not a baseline understanding of what the hell MLM is anyway. So any article that's going to even try to like approach it, you like, where do you start to explain it to people just to like pierce through the bullshit to be like, well, this is actually what they're stemmed from. They just kind of like, well, Epicure just shut down, and we interviewed somebody who was at the top less than a fraction of a percent, and they said they lost money, and then they're so sad, but they've signed up with another one, and then that's the end. And so I have more understanding now about the constraints that people like that journalists would be under just to try to write an article. So thank you for explaining.
Yeah, and the same forces that chiefly Amway, because they're the most politically powerful MLM, but the industry in general has been part of this push over the last 20 years, 30 years of, the extreme financialization of American industry, total privatization, right? Like pulling public money from things like journalism, from education, from healthcare, from all this stuff, right? Encouraging a really unregulated financial market where we get private equity companies that can buy up journalism outlets. And so the degradation of journalism that makes actually it a lot harder for there's just less journalism. There's less local journalism. Like if you look at the coverage of Neutra Bio in the 50s, what's amazing is how much local journalism there was of like, what the fuck is this, right? And so like to lose that is really, really bad for MLM because like you can't, if you live in Provo, Utah, if you live in, somewhere else where you want to go to your local paper, you just have less choices. And so that is those forces that the MLM architects have tried to use to shape the way, financial regulation, financial oversight, all of that makes it easier for them to do their business, right? It also has degraded journalism, and made it harder to have people just pay attention, all of which is like a threat to democracy, right? Not to again put my tinfoil hat on, but truly, right? Like if you have a nation of people with very little opportunities who are desperate for money, and then very little ways for them to speak out and challenge, that's really democracy. That's a way of keeping people from making choices, from being really free. I mean, that's really where we are. And MLM pioneered all of that from the very beginning. From the very first decision to say our workers are independent contractors, so they don't have to clock in, clock out. They don't get benefits. They don't, all of that. What they were like, we want a wild west in which to do our business. And now everyone wants a wild west. Tech wants a wild west. Finance wants a wild west. Everybody wants to just be out for themselves, and we're all supposed to say, okay, because may the best women win. May the hardest working women win. May the women who plug in the most, who get poured into the most, who log on the most, who go live the most, like, you're gonna win. And we know what happens in reality.
Jennifer asks, does your book cover the charities MLMs help? Any Arbonne conferences I attended heavily focused on the people their charities helped.
Yes. And I'm trying to think of specifics, but certainly like part of the Potemkin village I was talking about earlier is all the charity appeal. And certainly a big part of the story is how Amway kind of set themselves up as a really Christian company, and as the kind of clean cut version of MLM, and that's part of why Amway was not shut down, but these other companies that were a little flashier, a little less conservative were shut down in the 70s. But I definitely noticed that in my contemporary reporting, and I think it's so insidious and gross, and especially the idea that the money being given to charities is from the distributors is like insane. You're just like giving away this money that's been just given to you by your distributors. Meanwhile, they're canceling people's accounts, or they don't pay out their last check, or all this stuff. So yes, definitely touch on that in the book.
Here's another comment. Q-3, it's such an insidious way of twisting the entrepreneur ideal. Start your own business. Don't know how because our education system is trash. That's okay. We made it easy. Just buy a starter kit or buy our course or join our mastermind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really it's really a dastardly story that they figured out how to tell. And if you want to really go back to the moment that I was just talking about, when MLM, direct selling at the time before MLM was invented, figured out how to keep this category of labor, independent contractors, like much basically degraded, right, or unprotected, whatever. And it wasn't just direct sellers, door-to-door sellers. It was agricultural workers, domestic workers. So that was all during the New Deal. So that's coming out of the Great Depression. So FDR's New Deal creates all of these systems of social welfare as we know them today, Social Security, unemployment benefits, all of that. In addition to things like child labor laws, right? Like the Depression was so destructive in the United States that it created this moment where, even though there's lots of ways it was insufficient, the New Deal said, in America, you get a solid base from which to work, right? So that's when you get, and at the time it was bigger because we had things like the GI Bill eventually, right? That's sort of part of social welfare state, where it paid people to go to college after World War II. Anyway, but we're gonna make sure that you can organize a union at your workplace if you want, and that you have a minimum wage, and that kids aren't like on the factory line, just the basics. And so that was part of the New Deal. And part of the connection I make in the book is how the MLM, the very first creators of MLM, and then definitely the Amway creators, were really connected to this very powerful reaction to the New Deal, where big business in the United States, which before the Depression, that's the Gilded Age. That's when business could really do whatever they wanted. They're really living much better than the rest of Americans. They decided, we're going to figure out a way to get back to that, but we have to tell a different story. And what's the story? It's that actually capitalism isn't the problem. Private ownership, private capital isn't the problem. Profit making isn't the problem. It's that there isn't enough freedom for everyone to do it. So basically, like, we're going to fix capitalism with more capitalism. And, there's lots of different names that this version of the story gets, all the way down to like supply side economics. Someone put Reagan in the chat, Reaganomics. Like, the libertarians think this. Like, there's lots of different ways, but like the essential story is that workers actually don't need more protection. We don't need more government intervention on capital. Actually, what we need is more freedom. So that's lower taxes, no regulation, that Wild West that I was talking about. That's how we're gonna all benefit, right? But what's happened is, you have somebody like Jeff Bezos who is making astronomically more than the people who work for him. And what is that shape? It looks like this, right? So, that we've really actually been pushed into a pyramid shape. And the MLM founders were really seeding that on the ground. Like, and they do it today when you're an MLM, and it's like, you don't need the government. You don't need welfare. You don't need anyone helping you out. You did this by yourself. I mean, that rhetoric is as age old as the Amway guys in the 60s saying, the government turns us into slaves. That really was what they were saying. So anyway, that's why MLM is like, it's such an important story. If politicians were doing this at the time, like politicians like Reagan were doing it on the stage or the podium, MLM was doing it in kitchens and living rooms, and they were seeding this idea that like you can do it all by yourself. Yeah, that it's almost 100 years of this story, and unfortunately, I think a lot of people don't see an alternative. They even though it's not working, a lot of people, it's like, just keep going. We're going to get out of this. We're all going to start our own businesses. We're going to do Trump's crypto coin. We're going to do affiliate marketing. We're going to start our own, and now we're going to build factories with all these tariffs, which is like a hilarious, idea that we're just going to suddenly go back to industrialization. Anyway, but right, this idea that we are all going to be these entrepreneurs, who's going to work for us then? How can we all be the bosses? Where are the workers? And then some people would answer that it's AI and it's bots. But anyway, so yeah, there's a lot to say about MLMs and capitalism.
You have an excellent way of explaining things, and just doing like the little like kind of historical summary, the précis, because when people are coming across this, it's just like there's so much information out there, and you have a really good way of just like putting it out, and it makes it easy to understand. Do you have time for a few more questions?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so we've got another one from Dave Vaughn. How should future journalists approach this topic, Bridget? Assuming if MLM was covered as the mafia, journalists would face more legal threats.
I think journalists shouldn't be afraid to speak the truth. And, the mafia thing is like, I'm quoting a law professor who wrote it in a court document that was not public, but was made public eventually. I called that professor and I said, what do you think about this statement? And he's now in his 80s. And he said, I think Amway is good if you have a taste for larceny. It's in the book. He said it on the record. So like, journalists wouldn't, that's not something a journalist would say, but tell the truth. And the truth is that MLM has never proven itself beyond this hypothetical idea that you can have an MLM, legitimate MLM, that keeps itself from being a pyramid scheme. There are these rules. Now, they have never been tested. MLMs will cite Peter Vandernat and what Bill Keep's 2002 paper on the theoretical structure of a functional MLM. It's theoretical. We've never had an MLM crack open its books, because why? Then they go to jail or they're shut down. That's what happened in Holiday Magic and Costco. They were able to look at the retailing and see that no one was selling anything. Everybody was just Ponziing it up. They were just buying, right? Amway never had to open its books. Amway, the FTC asked Amway, do you keep records on retailing and income and all that? And they said, we don't keep those records. They started keeping some of them in 1980. What a coincidence, So like that, they've never had to prove that. What happens? Herbalife cracked open its books and they were, $200 million fine and supposedly restructured. I FOIA'd a Freedom of Information Act. I asked to see the independent monitor who's supposed to be watching Herbalife to make sure that it is keeping up with the rules that keep it from being a pyramid scheme. It was all redacted. And I was not able to get more information from the FTC on what that actually looks like, that monitoring. And I have sat in some Herbalife training sessions since then, and I have some ideas about how they might be making it look like they have a lot more customers than they do. And so, yeah, I've got raged too long. I forgot the question, but yes, just tell the truth. Tell the truth is what I would say. To tell what you see, be honest about what you see.
Multipurpose Mama says there are several MLM trainers who have books, podcasts, courses, etc. Each of them claim that they were top earners in their company, but left to help more people. This was one of the industry red flags for me, because if they were so successful, why would they leave? I feel like the people who prey on MLM participants from the outside is a whole separate story.
Yes. And that's actually kind of like the spooky note where the book ends. Because Monique, I won't give it away, but she kind of, the woman whose story is, and that's a pseudonym, that's not her real name, but it goes in and out. And actually my job, New York Magazine, is going to run an excerpt on Thursday and it'll have her story. So anyway, the coaching or the MLM, world, is, yes, it's a huge, huge problem. And what coaching has taken from MLM, I think, is really harmful. Like coaching a coach is a coach is a coach, which is like what Jay Marie has, I think, said on her podcast about, though the coach is coaching coaches or whatever, which is funny, but very true. So I totally agree.
I was happy to see that covered in your book too, because there's just been so many elements that haven't been. And
I think some journalists are writing coaching books. I know of at least one that has sold. The problem with books is like I said, they take years. So that's really annoying because you want it like right now. I think a big coaching feature article would be great. Maybe there have been some. Yeah.
DTI says, did you uncover the moment when the term MLM became verboten among these companies? They all deny they are MLM now. They are all direct selling now.
Oh, yes. Yes. And what's funny is actually in the book, I also had to cover my editor early on was like, okay, well, when did we start using the word multi-level marketing? So in the book, I track how, when MLM was invented, it was straight up called a profits pyramid, like straight up. And you can just if you have access to newspaper archives in your library, or if you have a newspaper archive, like online account, you can just look. And in the 50s and 60s, every one of these called them pyramiding your profits or a pyramid club, or it was not hidden, the word pyramid. And then when the particularly overtly scammy companies, Holiday Magic and Costco and Dare to Be Great, came about in the 60s and 70s, pyramid scheme started being put together. And that's when that became a bad word. And then Amway and these other companies start putting out ads that say, we're multi-level marketing, we're different. And so that's when they come up with this like very fancy sounding name. Yes. And then, you know, in the sort of .com era, network marketing becomes a thing because it's very like tech sounding, internet-y, you know, Amway becomes Quickstar. Like, it's like, we're different, we're modern. And then now going all the way back to direct selling is so funny, right? Because of course, like, it's not direct selling at all. Literally the whole point is it's indirect. Isn't direct selling like what you're actually not doing? So that makes me laugh. But yes, the Direct Selling Association and the Direct Selling Education Fund, which is its whole other thing we could talk about too. The fellows, sorry, the DSEF, the education fellows who are hired by the DSA to like teach network marketing in like your local community college, which to me is horrifying. And that has a whole section in the end of the book too.
Can
But
you just
yes,
briefly
yes.
explain that? Like, because people, like, there's a lot of acronyms and it can be kind of like really like brain rattling for people, like DSA, and then this other thing that's the DSEF. People have heard of the DSSRC or DSRC or whatever the hell it is.
Yes,
DSSRC.
yes,
But the DSEF,
yes.
people that aren't that familiar with. And can you maybe just talk a little bit about that? And then I promise I'll let you go. I really appreciate
This is yeah. So the DSEF has been around since this moment where MLM was in crisis, right, in the 70s when they needed legitimacy, and it is the DSA funds fellows, academic fellows at universities and colleges all around the country, and they produce courses and content, educational content on MLM. So like they've made a few books and they are academics and they produce studies on MLM. And more recently, they literally have been used not more recently, throughout, they have also been like expert witnesses in MLM lawsuits. So that's a huge function they provide, because the FTC will call on somebody like Peter Vandernat. He's an economist, FTC economist, who would testify about why an MLM was a pyramid scheme or functioning as a pyramid scheme. And the DSEF fellows get on and they say, no, you can see that there's enough retailing here, blah, blah, blah. Or this one professor who is used a lot, who did not respond to emails from me asking to talk to her, but she was deployed in Herbalife and she came up with this. Oh my God, I'm not going to remember it correctly and it's going to annoy me. She came up with a concept called like voluntary harm or something, like to describe how to basically justify why people are losing in MLM. And it was like about a sort of academic concept for why someone might get like non-financial benefits out of MLM. So it's like voluntary financial harm. I wish I could remember exactly what anyway. So they literally come up with academic concepts to justify MLM. And then the really harmful thing I think they do is they like teach courses for kids. So like college kids who might like, you know, think of this as like a career. I mean, that's just so dark. Like, you cannot, even if you don't think MLM is a pyramid scheme, if you accept the industry's own statistics about success, the idea that you would encourage children, teenagers, young people to do this as a career is like so outrageous. And that they have them all over the country in all kinds of colleges. So if you see something, say something.
I came across one here in Alberta and I made a video on this. It was a professor and it was he is with the DSEF. He's on the academic advisory board with Cutco Vector Marketing, and had a course for his fourth year students. It was called Selling Smiles 101. And the students didn't have to purchase the knives. They were like given to them. But there was this whole, like, it's like you're going to learn entrepreneurial skills. And then they, you know, put this veneer of you're really helping people by all the money that they raised was going to go to this charity for kids with cancer. It was like the Children's Wish Foundation or something like that. I had no idea this thing, like this DSEF existed. And most recently, somebody had sent me a document, because they have these documents that they create. I guess on a yearly basis or maybe a quarterly basis. And they actually had in this document, like participants that have left multi-level marketing claim that their critical thinking skills have improved. And they had like a little graph, and it was like proof that participation in multi-level marketing is beneficial. I'm like, you can't even make this shit up.
It's really horrifying. And it has escaped, it's like, again, I it's probably overly dramatic to compare it to like the opioid crisis, but like I do really see the Amway families, especially as akin to the Sackler families. So they're the owners of Purdue Pharma, and they have been exposed as basically encouraging the pill peddling in the U.S. that enabled a lot of doctors to indiscriminately prescribe opioids and cause the opioid crisis, excuse me. And the Sacklers, like, it's been well documented that they, they're being sued, and they knew a lot about this anyway. So, I do see a comparison, and like the idea that, maybe they would, they paid doctors to make it seem like taking these medications, which were safer than they were, or that, sent them around to make people feel safe. And so that's how I see you go to your university professor of economics or ethics. Sometimes they have ethics in the title, and you go and you want, you go to them for advice, and they tell you, do this. It's so incredibly harmful and disgusting, to be frank.
Well, this has been so incredible. I want to thank you so much. So again, just to like recap, when is your book available? Where can people buy it? Where can people find you?
Yes. So it's out in a week. And you can pre-order it. And pre-orders are really helpful for authors. And every single one counts, because people really don't order that many books. Oh my God. Thank you, Melissa J. That's so nice. Anyway, people don't order books. So like, even to be a bestseller is like only a few thousand books. It's really embarrassing. Like, people have more Instagram followers than bestsellers sell books. So every single pre-order helps. And I think the Penguin link is in here somewhere.
Yes, I put it in the description below, so you could go on to that. And I know there was other people that had said they had pre-ordered too. Now, I wanted to pull this up.
The Penguin link you can use. You can use Amazon. You can also use bookshop.org, which is an independent bookstore. You can you can order from any indie or Amazon or whatever you want to do. And it's, again, this was so fun to do, and I love talking to people that care about this, and everybody who has their experiences. Like, I so appreciate engaging, and like Julie, you and I spoke years ago, and like I've just watched you like just totally like kick ass doing this, and like I love your bravery, and you seem to have so much fun too, which I love, because so much like, you're so undaunted, and it's really inspiring, and everyone has been great. So I really appreciate it. And yeah, pre-order comes out next Tuesday. And then my Instagram, where I'll be like sharing, I have some other fun stuff coming up, is Little Boss's book. And that's somewhere, like, I think on your post.
I've put it here, like also in the description below for anybody. And you can even find, I advertised this on my Instagram. So anybody that's watching this, a lot of people go onto my Instagram, and you'll see like you could like follow the link back to Bridget.
And I feel like there's some inside jokes on potatoes happening in
here. Okay, so this is what I was going to actually bring up, because so here, Lily says, lick the stream, y'all. It tastes like high altitude potatoes. So I started to make content about a fictional multi-level marketing company called High Altitude Potatoes. So I started making
I remember this. Okay, yeah. Okay. Now this is coming back to me.
So this has just like exploded. We are actually disrupting the network marketing industry.
Well, okay. So speaking of that, there will be a really fun. My friend I don't want to say too much. My friend made me like a teaser video that I think you will all recognize as like akin to some opportunity videos you might have seen, and we're gonna like I'm gonna post that at the end of the week, and like release it in a friend's newsletter and stuff. So there'll be some fun stuff coming up. And hopefully you guys who are familiar with all this will get all the kind of references. But anyway, I love this. And we say like the stream instead of like, because, funny. Like the stream. I like it.
What do you think about Bridget's performance here on her first live stream? I can't even believe this. I've got like the first live. I think like you deserve a high five.
Well done. Thank you guys. This is really great. I appreciate so much. And everybody, if you like follow on that Instagram account, I'd love to chat to anybody, and I'm going to try to be posting on there more regularly about the book. So cool.
Well, thank you so much. You're welcome back anytime. Whatever I can do to help spread awareness about your book. I read her book. I love it. I recommend it. I feel comfortable with it. I was given it, full disclosure, I was given a digital copy and I read it. I want to just make sure that everybody knows that.
It's a fun cover. It looks fun. Oh my God. Hi, Erin.
Hey, here we go.
Yeah, it's fun. And a lot of this is notes, just so no one's too afraid. There's some notes. So it's not too long. And there's an audiobook. There is an audiobook. And the reader is great. I love her. She's really cool. She has a wonderful voice. So Erin, that's okay. We shouted you out already though.
Yeah. And Lavender Rain is pre-ordering as well.
Oh, all right, amazing.
You have the last word. You have the last word, Bridget. I'll just say goodbye to everybody.
I have to go watch a Knicks game.
So I want to just say to the chat, thank you so much. I know sometimes I make a real point to read everybody's comment, but tonight it wasn't like that. But I think that we did a really good job covering this.
Oh yeah, I'll see what it's called again.
Little Bosses Everywhere, available May 6th. Pre-order now. Ask your favorite anti-MLM content creator. They've probably heard of it. Go check out Aaron B's, Hannah Alonso, Cece Suarez, Savannah Marie.
Everybody.
The list goes on and on. This is an incredible book. I fully endorse it. It's really helped. So thank you so much for watching. And Bridget, you can do the sign off.
Oh my God, I can? Oh no. Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys. And we're all bosses. Everybody's their own boss forever.
Bye.
Bye.